A homeless kid shouted to a millionaire woman, "Don't drink that. Your husband put poison." Upon returning home, the millionaire was shocked to discover what her husband was planning to do with. The morning sun filtered through the silk curtains of the Boston mansion, casting deceptively warm shadows across Emma Anderson's pale face. At 35, she had everything money could buy, yet the dizziness that hit her as she tried to sit up reminded her that something wasn't right. Her world spun as she steadied herself against the imported mahogany headboard, another wave of nausea washing over her. Her trembling hand reached for the silver frame on the nightstand, her parents' last photo before the accident 10 years ago. "I miss you both so much," she whispered, her fingers tracing their smiling faces. The image of their car accident still haunted her dreams, though the details seemed increasingly fuzzy with each passing year. "Darling, you shouldn't be up yet." William's voice, smooth as honey, came from the doorway. Her husband of 5 years entered carrying a breakfast tray, his expensive suit impeccable as always. "I brought your medicine and your favorite tea, the one that helps with the nausea." Emma's stomach churned at the sight of the pills. "I don't think they're helping, William. Maybe we should try a different doctor. These symptoms keep getting worse instead of better." "Nonsense." His tone remained gentle, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Dr. Matthews is the best. You trust me, don't you? After everything we've been through?" He sat beside her, brushing her hair back with practiced tenderness. "Remember how lost you were after your parents' accident? Who helped you rebuild everything?" The memory of their first meeting flooded back. Emma, devastated after her parents' death, struggling to manage their small real estate company. William, the financial advisor who seemed heaven-sent, helping her transform it into an empire. He had been her rock, her savior, her everything. "Of course I trust you," she replied, obediently swallowing the pills. William watched intently until she finished every last one. Later that morning, in her office overlooking downtown Boston, Emma struggled to focus on the quarterly reports. The room wouldn't stop spinning, and the numbers on the screen blurred before her eyes. The empire she'd built seemed to be slipping through her fingers, just like her health. Mrs. Anderson? Her secretary Martha appeared at the door, concern etched on her face. "This is the 3rd time this week you've looked unwell. Should I cancel the board meeting? The investors can wait." "No," Emma straightened, forcing strength into her voice. "I'm fine, just tired. We've worked too hard for this meeting." She couldn't show weakness, not when they were so close to closing their biggest deal yet. Her phone buzzed. William again. "Remember to take it easy. Love, I couldn't bear to lose you like we lost them. Don't forget your afternoon medicine. I'll have Marcus from security bring it up." Emma's eyes drifted to her parents' photo on her desk. Something about William's words sent a chill down her spine, but before she could analyze why, the room began to spin violently. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was William bursting through the door with suspicious efficiency, as if he'd been waiting nearby all along. How had he gotten there so quickly from his office across town? "Don't worry, everyone." His voice seemed to come from far away. "My wife just needs rest. I'll take care of everything." He waved away Martha's concerns with practiced charm. Everything always seemed to need William's care these days. Every decision, every meeting, every aspect of her life somehow required his guidance and approval. As consciousness slipped away, Emma didn't see the calculated look in her husband's eyes, or the way he quickly dismissed Martha's attempt to call an ambulance. She didn't notice how he pocketed her phone before anyone could reach her emergency contacts. The mansion that had once felt like a dream was slowly becoming her prison. She just didn't know it yet. But soon, very soon, a chance encounter would shatter the carefully constructed illusion of her perfect life. Tommy pressed himself against the cold brick wall of Pete's coffee shop, his worn sneakers silent on the wet pavement. At 12, he'd become an expert at being invisible. His keen eyes watched the same scene that had played out every morning for the past 3 weeks. The man in the expensive suit, William Anderson, he'd learned, arrived precisely at 7:45 a.m. Tommy's stomach growled as he observed the ritual. William would meet a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses in the corner booth, their voices too low to hear. But today was different. Tommy had managed to get closer. "The dosage needs to be increased," the thin man muttered, sliding a small vial across the table. "She's building tolerance faster than expected." William's perfectly manicured hand covered the vial. "Just make sure it remains untraceable, like the others." In the alley behind the coffee shop, Sarah, Tommy's grandmother, sorted through discarded newspapers. Her weathered hands, once used to wielding a judge's gavel, now searched for anything to keep them warm. "Did you see her today?" she asked as Tommy returned. "Not yet, Grandma, but she always comes at 8. Tommy's voice softened. "She's the only one who ever leaves us real food, not just leftovers." Sarah's eyes clouded with memory. "Some people have genuine kindness in them. That's what makes them perfect targets for men like him." She clutched her tattered coat closer, remnants of her former life hidden beneath years of hardship. Right on schedule, Emma Anderson appeared, her designer heels clicking on the sidewalk. Despite her obvious wealth, she always had a kind smile for the baristas and left generous tips. But today, Tommy noticed her hands trembling as she reached for her purse. "She's getting worse," he whispered to himself, watching through the window as she sat at her usual table. The new barista, hired just weeks ago, brought her usual order without being asked. Tommy's heart raced as he watched the coffee being prepared. The barista glanced furtively around before adding something from a small vial, the same one William had passed earlier. "Grandma?" Tommy's voice shook. "I think they're poisoning her." Sarah grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Are you absolutely sure of what you saw?" Her eyes held a familiar intensity, one from her days presiding over life-changing cases. "Yes," Tommy swallowed hard. "Just like you said happened to the others, before he took everything from them." Through the window, they watched Emma lift the cup to her lips. Tommy's feet moved before his brain could catch up. Sarah's warning died in her throat as she watched her grandson dart toward the coffee shop door. But Tommy hesitated, his hand on the handle. Who would believe a homeless kid? What if he was wrong? What if they hurt him, or worse, his grandmother? Emma's cup inched closer to her mouth. Sarah's voice carried from the alley, barely a whisper but filled with the strength of her past life. Sometimes, Tommy, doing nothing is the greatest crime of all. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed as Tommy made his choice. The cup was almost at Emma's lips when a small, desperate voice cut through the morning chatter. "Don't drink that." Emma froze, the coffee cup inches from her lips, as the disheveled boy rushed toward her table. His eyes were wild with fear, but it was the certainty in his voice that made her hesitate. "Please," he breathed heavily, "don't drink it. I saw them, your husband and another man, they put something in it. They do it every time you get better." The cup trembled in Emma's hand as fragments of memories crashed through her mind. The mysterious illness, always worse after her morning coffee, William's insistence on this particular cafe, the new barista who always served her without being asked. "Security," the barista called out, but Tommy stood his ground. "Check your phone," he urged quickly. "There's a video call in his office right now. Please." Before security could reach them, Emma gathered her things and hurried out, her heart pounding. The boy's words echoed in her mind as she drove home, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The mansion was quiet when she entered, but William's voice drifted from his study. She moved silently toward the door, left slightly ajar. "The plan is working perfectly," William's voice oozed satisfaction. "The doctors will attribute it to natural causes. Stress, perhaps depression over her parents' death. A tragic but believable end to the Anderson Empire's heir." Emma's knees buckled. She steadied herself against the wall, her world spinning for reasons that had nothing to do with poison. "And the documents?" another voice asked. "All prepared. Once she's gone, everything transfers to me. The company, the properties, everything she inherited and built. No one will question a grieving husband." Biting back bile, Emma slipped into their bedroom, pulling out the hidden key she hadn't used in years. Her father's old filing cabinet in the basement held documents she'd never fully reviewed after their death. Accident reports, insurance papers, financial records. They painted a picture that turned her blood to ice. William's name appeared in documents dating back to before her parents' accident. The brake failure hadn't been random. "Looking for something, darling?" Emma whirled around. William stood in the doorway, his perfect facade cracking to reveal something cold and reptilian beneath. "How long?" she whispered. "Was any of it real?" "Real?" He laughed softly. "What's real is business, Emma. Your father was going to expose my operations. What you were, let's say, a convenient consolation prize. Rich, naive, and so desperate for someone to trust. You killed them." The words felt like glass in her throat. "Technically, I merely arranged things." He moved closer. "Just like I've been arranging your tragic decline. So sad. A woman crumbling under the weight of running her father's company. Now, be a good wife and take your medicine." Emma backed away, documents clutched to her chest. "They'll know. People will investigate." William's smile turned cruel. "Who? Your friends? I've spent years convincing them you're unstable. The doctors? They're on my payroll. Face it, Emma. You have no one." The truth crashed over her like a wave. Her perfect life had been an elaborate trap, and she'd walked right into it. The house she'd thought was her sanctuary was really her prison. The man she'd trusted with everything had orchestrated her entire world's destruction. As William advanced, phone already dialing his private security, Emma realized with horrifying clarity that she had only two choices: submit to his plan and die slowly, or run and risk losing everything. The boy's fearful eyes flashed in her memory. Someone had tried to warn her. Someone still cared enough to risk everything to save her. Emma ran. Behind her, William's voice carried a promise. "You won't get far, darling. You have nowhere to go." He was right about one thing. She had nowhere to go. But for the first time in years, she was finally seeing clearly. Emma's Mercedes screeched to a halt outside Claire's townhouse. Her best friend of 20 years would help. She had to. But as she pounded on the door, the expression that greeted her made her stomach sink. "Emma?" Claire's voice was cautious, rehearsed. William called. "He's worried sick about you." "Claire, please. He's trying to kill me. He killed my parents. I have proof." Emma fumbled with the documents, but Claire stepped back. "See, this is exactly what he warned us about." Claire's eyes filled with practiced concern. "These paranoid episodes. Will says they're getting worse. The doctors are worried." "Doctors? What doctors?" Emma's voice cracked. "Claire, you've known me my whole life, and I've watched you spiral since your parents died." Claire's words cut deep. "William's been your rock. He just wants to help you get better." Through the window, Emma spotted Claire's husband on the phone, undoubtedly calling William. She backed away from the door, her last lifeline to her old life severing before her eyes. At her lawyer's office, the scene repeated. James Anderson, no relation, had handled her family's legal affairs for decades. "Emma, you need help," he said, not even looking at the documents. "William's already filed for temporary guardianship. It's for your own good." "He's stealing everything." Emma's voice rose. "My company, my parents' legacy. Your episodes are affecting the company's stability." James slid a paper across the desk. "Sign this. Voluntary commitment. Just for a few weeks. William will handle everything." Emma fled, but everywhere she turned she found closed doors and concerned looks. Her executive assistant, Martha, wouldn't meet her eyes. The family doctor had security escort her out. Even her housekeeper of 15 years shook her head sadly. "Mrs. Anderson?" A police officer approached her car in the parking garage. "Your husband's worried. Let us take you somewhere safe." Emma gunned the engine, tires squealing. In her rearview mirror, she caught the officer speaking into his radio. Her phone buzzed with a message from William. "Coming home would be wisest, darling, before things get unfortunate." Attached was a video of her outburst at Claire's, already making rounds on social media. Comments flooded in. "Poor William, dealing with this. Money and grief can break anyone. She needs professional help." At a red light, Dr. Matthews' words from her last checkup echoed. "Paranoid delusions are common in cases like yours. Trust your husband." The hotel clerk recognized her from the viral video. The bank manager regretfully informed her that access to her accounts required her husband's approval. "Given your condition." William's web had been perfectly woven. Every escape route blocked, every potential ally poisoned against her. Her phone chimed again, a message from an unknown number. "Mom's old coffee shop. Back door, now." Emma stared at the screen, tears blurring her vision. The homeless boy, her only truth teller in a world of carefully crafted lies. Behind her, police sirens wailed. Her face flashed on a digital billboard. Missing, Emma Anderson. Mentally unstable, approach with caution. William's voice played on the car radio. My wife is very ill, we just want her safe. If anyone sees her. The message blinked on her phone. Back door. Now, Emma made her choice, swerving toward the old coffee shop. Let them call her unstable. Let them whisper and point. For the first time in years, she was thinking perfectly clearly. The back alley of the old coffee shop reeked of garbage and lost dreams. Tommy grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her through a rusty door, just as police lights flashed at the street's end. They climbed dark stairs to a forgotten storage room where a figure waited in shadows. Sarah, she came. Tommy announced, pride mixing with urgency in his voice. The woman stepped forward and Emma gasped. Despite the worn clothes and weathered face, an unmistakable dignity radiated from her bearing. Emma Anderson, she said, her voice carrying echoes of authority. I've been watching your case develop for months. My case? Emma sank onto a crate, exhaustion finally catching up. 5 years ago, I was Judge Sarah Montgomery of the federal court. Sarah's eyes hardened. Until I started investigating a pattern of wealthy women dying under mysterious circumstances. Their common link? A financial advisor named William Parker. Emma's world tilted again. That's impossible. William's background was thoroughly vetted when you married? Sarah smiled bitterly. Just like his background was vetted when he married Catherine Brooks or Jennifer Martinez, both successful businesswomen who died from natural causes after prolonged illnesses. Tommy brought water in a clean paper cup. Show her, Grandma. Sarah pulled out a worn leather portfolio from behind some boxes. Inside, newspaper clippings and court documents told a chilling story. William Parker appeared in different cities under slightly altered names, always in the orbit of wealthy women who'd recently suffered family tragedies. I was getting close to exposing him, Sarah continued. Then suddenly, evidence appeared suggesting I was taking bribes. My reputation, my career, my life, destroyed overnight. Sound familiar? Emma's hands trembled as she recognized the pattern. The same thing he's doing to me now. He's perfected his technique, Sarah nodded. Social isolation, gaslighting, medical manipulation. By the time his victims realize what's happening, nobody believes them. But why didn't you go to the authorities? With what proof? Everything disappeared. My case files, my evidence, even my witnesses. Sarah's voice caught. I lost everything. Tommy's parents took me in, but then they died in a suspicious car accident, just like your parents. Emma's head snapped up. You think? I know. William's organization is vast. He has doctors, lawyers, even police on payroll. But he made one mistake this time. Sarah leaned forward. He didn't know I was watching. And thanks to Tommy, we saved you before the poisoning progressed too far. Sirens wailed outside. Tommy peeked through a grimy window. They're searching the block. I have proof, Emma said suddenly. Documents about my parents' accident. If we combine them with your investigation. It's a start, Sarah agreed. But we need more, and I know someone who might help. She pulled out a worn business card. Detective Rachel Martinez. She lost her sister to William's organization. She's been building a case quietly for years. Emma stared at the card, then at Sarah and Tommy, an unlikely family forged in tragedy, offering her a lifeline when her entire world had abandoned her. Why are you helping me? She whispered. Sarah's eyes met hers with fierce intensity. Because 10 years ago, nobody helped me, and because taking down William Parker might be our only chance at justice, for all of us. Police radio chatter drifted up from the street. In the gathering darkness, 3 people hunted by the same predator began plotting their resistance. The game was changing. William Parker had no idea that his perfect trap was about to become his own prison. Emma watched the morning news in Sarah's hideout, her heart pounding as William's perfectly crafted performance played out on the small TV screen. My wife's condition has deteriorated rapidly, he said, eyes glistening with practiced concern. The stress of running her father's company, the unresolved trauma of their deaths, it's all become too much. We just want her to get the help she needs. The anchor's voice dripped with sympathy. Breaking news. Emma Anderson, CEO of Anderson Enterprises, suffered what sources call a severe mental breakdown. Security footage shows her erratic behavior at multiple locations yesterday. Carefully edited clips played. her desperate pleas to Claire, her confrontation at the lawyer's office, her fleeing from the police. Out of context, she looked exactly like what William claimed. A woman unraveling. Her phone buzzed with an email from the board of directors. Emergency meeting concluded. Effective immediately, temporary suspension. They can't do this, Emma whispered, but the hits kept coming. All accounts suspended pending investigation. Restraining order granted to William Parker. Court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. Sarah placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. This is his pattern. First, he isolates, then he destroys. Tommy burst in, clutching a newspaper. They're searching the shelters. Police everywhere. A text from Martha, her once loyal assistant. William's worried sick. Please come home, we can help. Emma's phone pinged with notification after notification as her carefully built life crumbled. Friends posting about their concerns. Business associates distancing themselves. Social media flooded with speculation about her mental state. Your former housekeeper gave an interview, Tommy reported grimly. She's been talking to herself for months. The final blow came at noon. On live television, William, flanked by Emma's entire executive team, announced emergency measures to protect the company during this difficult time. Everything my parents built, Emma's voice broke. Everything I built. Look at me, Sarah commanded, her judge's authority breaking through. This is rock bottom. He's taken your reputation, your company, your friends, but he hasn't taken your mind. That's why we'll win. Detective Rachel Martinez slipped in through the back entrance. It's worse than we thought. He's got judges in his pocket. The commitment papers are ready. If they find you, they can hold you indefinitely. So we run? Tommy asked. No, Emma stood, something hardening in her eyes. We fight. Sarah, you said you had files? Rachel, your investigation? It's time to show William he picked the wrong woman to destroy. Rachel nodded grimly. My sister thought she was alone too. This time will be different. Outside, sirens wailed. Police radio chatter crackled about a possible sighting. In a penthouse across town, William Parker raised a glass to his reflection, certain of his victory. But in a forgotten room above an old coffee shop, 4 people whom William had tried to destroy began planning his downfall. Emma Anderson had lost everything, but she'd found something more valuable. Allies who knew the truth. The question was, could they stay alive long enough to prove it? Sarah's voice cut through the darkness. Remember, Emma? Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. Tommy squeezed her hand as police lights flashed outside. Her old life was gone, but maybe, just maybe, this new one would be strong enough to bring William Parker to justice. Detective Rachel Martinez spread the accident photos across the makeshift table. Emma's hands trembled as she recognized her father's mangled car. 10 years of fog lifted as Rachel connected the dots. 3 days before the crash, your father made this call. Rachel played an old voicemail. James, something's wrong with the Anderson Group accounts. Foreign transfers, shell companies, get me those files from Parker Consulting. We need to. Emma's breath caught. That was the last time I heard his voice. The brake lines were cut, Rachel continued. Just like in 12 other accidents involving William's former clients. Always ruled mechanical failure, always involving people about to expose him. Sarah pulled out a yellowed newspaper. The pattern goes back 15 years. Look familiar? Emma's eyes widened at the headline. Judge's car crash ruled accident. Montgomery family devastated. Tommy's parents. My investigation was getting too close, Sarah's voice cracked. William didn't just take my career. He took my daughter, my son-in-law, left Tommy an orphan. Rachel opened her laptop. Your father found something in William's consulting firm. The day before he died, he downloaded massive files to an external drive. I never found any drive, Emma whispered, because it's still in the wreck. Rachel showed police photos. Evidence logged but misplaced during transfer. Officer in charge? Recently bought a vacation home he couldn't afford. Emma remembered her father's last morning. He was acting strange, said he needed to tell me something important. After dinner, he said, but they never made it to dinner. William's perfect crime, Rachel explained. Kill the threat, then comfort the grieving heir. Gain their trust, take control of their assets, then arrange their tragic demise. Tommy, who'd been quiet, suddenly spoke up. The coffee shop. That's where he meets them. The man with glasses. I heard them talking about The others. Rachel nodded. Dr. Marcus Klein, expert in untraceable toxins. He's William's cleanup specialist. Emma's mind raced through memories. William's convenient appearance after her parents' death, his insistence on handling all financial matters, the gradual isolation from friends and family. Wait, she grabbed her father's old phone from the evidence box. His passcode, my birthday, didn't work. Try their wedding anniversary, Sarah suggested. The phone unlocked. In the drafts folder, one unsent message. Emma, don't trust William Parker. The evidence is in the... Message cut off. Timestamp 10 minutes before the crash. He was trying to warn me, Emma's voice broke. All these years, the answer was right there. Rachel's phone buzzed. My contact at Impound. The car's still there, hidden in deep storage. We might find that drive. It's too dangerous, Sarah warned. William watches everything. I don't care, Emma stood. That drive is my father's last chance to tell the truth. William took everything else. He's not taking this. As they planned their next move, Emma held her father's phone. The partial message glowed accusingly. Don't trust William Parker. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered. I should have known sooner, but I promise he'll pay for what he did to all of us. Outside, thunder rolled across Boston's skyline. In his penthouse, William Parker reviewed security footage, unaware that his perfectly constructed house of cards was about to face a storm he never saw coming. The truth, buried for 10 years in twisted metal and corrupted files, was finally clawing its way to the surface. Emma's burner phone buzzed at 3:17 a.m., shattering the silence of her temporary apartment. Her heart raced when she saw Tommy's number flash across the screen, knowing he should be safely tucked away at Sarah's safe house. Emma, you need to hear this. Tommy's urgent whisper crackled through the speaker, his streetwise instincts evident in his hushed tone. I'm at the Old Market Street Cafe. William's here with some suits. They don't know I'm recording from the service alley. She gripped the phone tighter. Tommy, what are you doing out at this hour? Couldn't sleep. Saw fancy cars pulling up while I was checking our supply drops. Emma, you need to hear this. Through the phone, William's velvet voice slithered into her ear. Once the papers are signed, Anderson Enterprises Charitable Foundation becomes our perfect laundering operation. Who'll question donations to help homeless children? The irony is delicious. Emma's blood froze. The foundation was her father's legacy, his attempt to give street kids like Tommy a chance at a better life. 10 years of work, millions in legitimate aid, all about to become William's personal piggy bank. The meeting's getting interesting, Tommy whispered. Some guy in a weird tie keeps mentioning offshore accounts. Can you describe him? Gray hair, expensive watch, keeps touching his nose when he talks. Wait, Tommy's breath caught. They just mentioned Judge Montgomery, something about loose ends and similar solutions. Sarah burst into the room, still in her ragged disguise but with fire in her eyes. Her homeless woman facade dropped completely as she clutched her own phone. Tommy sent me the recording. That second voice with William, it's Daniel Patterson. He orchestrated my removal from the bench 3 years ago. How many men are there? Emma's hands trembled as she dialed Rachel on a second phone. 4 besides William, Tommy reported. They're drinking fancy whiskey, looking at documents. One's drawing something that looks like a flow chart. Emma, he's got papers ready for you to sign tomorrow. Kept mentioning voluntary commitment and property transfers. Don't move, Rachel commanded through Emma's other phone. We're 3 blocks away. This could be everything we need, but only if we handle it exactly right. My team's already recording from multiple angles. Sarah gripped Emma's arm. He'll destroy everything, the foundation, the evidence, all of it. Just like he destroyed my career, my family's reputation. We can't let him touch your father's legacy. No, Emma pulled away, a plan crystallizing in her mind. He needs my signature. He needs me compliant. That's his weak spot, his need to control everything personally. The mansion loomed against the pre-dawn sky 40 minutes later, every window blazing with light like predatory eyes. Emma parked where security directed, the folder of carefully prepared fake papers on the passenger seat, reflecting months of anticipation for this moment. William's security chief performed a cursory pat-down before escorting her to the study, the room where everything had started unraveling just days ago. The leather chairs still smelled of cigars and arrogance. William sat behind the massive desk, elegant as ever in his midnight blue suit. An unexpected pleasure, darling. Trouble sleeping? These recent events must be so stressful. Let's stop playing games. Emma's voice held steel beneath its silk. I know about the Foundation, about Judge Montgomery, about Daniel Patterson, about everything. A flash of surprise crossed William's face before his practiced smile returned. Do you? And what exactly do you think you know about my charitable interests? The study door opened with theatrical timing. Sarah stood there, no longer in her homeless disguise, but every inch the federal judge she'd once been, her silver hair framing a face hardened by justice denied. Behind her, Rachel's tactical team swarmed in with practiced precision. William's composure cracked for just a moment. His manicured hand moved toward his desk drawer. The papers are already being seized from the cafe, Rachel announced, handcuffs ready. Along with some very interesting audio recordings. Your colleagues were quite informative. You taught me well. Emma stepped closer, her smile cold and precise. About keeping evidence, about having powerful friends, about patience, about how true power means controlling every detail personally. As handcuffs clicked around William's wrists, Emma leaned close enough to smell his expensive cologne. You forgot the most important lesson, darling. Never underestimate the people you thought you'd destroyed. We make the most dangerous enemies. Outside, Tommy waited, in Rachel's unmarked car, his phone's recording the final nail in William's coffin. Emma watched through the window as Sarah hugged him, knowing this battle was won, but the war wasn't over. The Foundation would need protection, the evidence would need safeguarding, and William's network would need dismantling. William's smirk as he was led away told her there would be a price to pay for this victory. But this time she wasn't fighting alone. This time she had a family forged in the fire of survival. The safe house felt crowded with tension as Emma paced the floor. William's arrest should have been their victory, but his final smirk haunted her. She knew him too well. He always had contingency plans. They found 3 more bodies, Rachel announced, entering with fresh coffee. All matched William's pattern. The DA's building the strongest case I've seen. But Emma caught the detective's hesitation. But his lawyers are already moving. Claims of illegal search, police harassment. They're painting you as a mentally unstable woman, persecuting an innocent man. Sarah looked up from her laptop. He's activating his network. My old colleagues on the bench are receiving compelling evidence of your instability. Emma sank into a chair, the weight of the past weeks crushing down. Then she felt Tommy's small hand slip into hers. Remember what you told me? He asked. About being scared when you first took over your dad's company? She smiled weakly. I said I wasn't ready, but you did it anyway. Tommy's eyes held wisdom beyond his years. You're stronger than him. You always were. Emma squeezed his hand, memories flooding back. The day she took over Anderson Enterprises at 25, terrified but determined. Every challenge she'd overcome, every victory she'd earned, before William poisoned it all. He's right. Sarah moved to the window. William's power comes from making strong women believe they're weak. It's time to show him how wrong he is. Rachel spread photos across the table, William's victims over the years. Each of these women fought alone, that's why they lost. But we're not alone, Emma stood, something shifting in her core. Years of manipulation and fear crystallized into steel. We have each other. And we have the truth. She grabbed a marker, approaching the evidence board. William's weakness isn't just his ego, it's his need for control. Every plan has his personal touch. The coffee shop meetings, Tommy added excitedly. He always handles things himself. Exactly. Emma's marker flew across the board. The bank transfers, the doctor visits, the legal documents. He can't delegate the important pieces. Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding, which means everything traces back to him personally. No cutouts, no real deniability. His arrogance makes him vulnerable, Rachel nodded. But we need every victim's story. All the evidence, all the patterns. Emma turned to the group, fire in her eyes. Then let's give them a voice. Every woman he destroyed, every family he tore apart. Not just for the court, for the public. The next hours were a blur of activity. Sarah activated old legal networks, finding survivors willing to testify. Rachel coordinated with law enforcement across states. Tommy, with his perfect memory, connected dates and details they'd missed. And Emma? She found her strength. Not the fragile power William had let her believe she had, but something unbreakable, forged in the fire of betrayal and reborn in the love of her newfound family. William thinks prison will be a minor inconvenience, she told them as dawn approached. He expects his influence to protect him, his money to buy freedom. But, Sarah prompted, recognizing the determination in her voice, but he taught me too well, about building networks, about leveraging influence. Emma's smile held no warmth. By the time we're done, his own world will be his prison. Tommy hugged her fiercely. He won't know what hit him. As the sun rose over Boston, Emma looked at her unlikely family, a former judge, a street-smart boy, and a dedicated detective. Together, they weren't just survivors of William's crimes. They were justice's sword, and it was finally time to strike. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, Emma knew with absolute certainty they would win. The morning sun cast long shadows through the courthouse windows as Emma stood before the mirror in the witness preparation room. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her charcoal gray suit, not the designer brands William had always insisted upon, but a new one, chosen with Sarah's help. Battle armor for what lay ahead. The face that looked back at her had changed in these past weeks. Gone was the carefully maintained mask of Boston's perfect socialite. The woman who stared back now bore eyes hardened by betrayal and strengthened by survival. "These just arrived from the lab," Rachel entered, holding a thick manila envelope. "Final toxicology reports. The patterns match all his previous victims. It's irrefutable." Emma nodded, remembering the countless mornings of mysterious illness, the carefully orchestrated poisoning that had nearly claimed her life. Any word from Dr. Klein? Singing like a canary in protective custody. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Turns out even William's most loyal allies have a breaking point, especially when faced with multiple murder charges. Sarah entered, still adjusting the unfamiliar weight of her restored judge's robes. The reinstatement ceremony had been just yesterday, a small but significant victory as the truth about William's campaign against her came to light. "His defense team is massive," Sarah warned, her experienced eyes reflecting concern. "Harrison, Matthews, and Wolf, the most expensive criminal lawyers in Massachusetts. They'll try to break you on the stand." "They can try." Emma touched the antique locket containing her parents' photo. "But I'm already broken. What they don't understand is that broken things, when put back together, become stronger at the mended places." Tommy slipped into the room, looking uncomfortable in his new suit. He'd insisted on being there, despite everyone's concerns about his safety. "The gallery's filling up," he reported. "All those women, they look like you did when you first ran from him, scared but angry." Emma knelt before him, straightening his tie. "That's why we're here. Not just for us, but for all of them. Every life he destroyed, every family he tore apart." "Mrs. Anderson?" A court officer appeared at the door. "They're ready." The main courtroom fell into hushed silence as William was led in. He'd somehow managed to make prison orange look like a fashion choice, his silver hair perfectly styled, his movements graceful despite the handcuffs. Ever the performer, he offered polite nods to his legal team. Then he saw the gallery. Emma watched his confident smile flicker as he registered the packed rows. Not just journalists and curious onlookers, but faces that clearly unsettled him. Women from across the country, some he'd widowed, others he'd tried to destroy, all bearing witness. His carefully constructed world of isolated victims was collapsing as they united. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed. The Honorable Judge Michaels presiding. William's lead attorney Harrison rose with practiced authority. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I must object to the circus atmosphere being cultivated here. My client, a respected businessman and philanthropist, is being subjected to a coordinated campaign of character assassination." Objection. The prosecutor, Diana Chen, stood. Emma had initially worried about the young ADA handling such a complex case, but Rachel's recommendation had proved solid. The defense's attempts to control the narrative by attacking victims who've come forward is exactly the pattern of manipulation central to this case. Sustained, Judge Michael's gavel crack echoed like a gunshot. "Mr. Harrison, this court will not be complicit in further traumatizing alleged victims. Proceed with the bail hearing." Emma took the stand, feeling William's predatory gaze attempting to pierce her resolve. But where once she would have wilted under that calculated stare, now she met it with steel in her spine and ice in her veins. "Mrs. Anderson," Harrison approached, all expensive suit and rehearsed concern. "Isn't it true that you've been experiencing paranoid delusions? That multiple medical professionals have expressed concern about your mental state?" "What I experienced," Emma's voice rang clear and strong, "was systematic poisoning, documented by toxicology reports the prosecution has submitted. What I discovered was a decade-long pattern of murder and fraud, documented by financial records that detail every shell company, every fraudulent transfer, every stolen life." She pulled out a small recorder, watching William's face. "And this morning, your associate Dr. Marcus Klein provided a full confession, detailing every poison, every death, every cover-up. Would you like to hear it?" The mask cracked. For just a moment, raw fury leaked through William's careful facade. He hadn't known about Klein's betrayal. "The defense would like to review this new evidence," Harrison sputtered, losing his smooth demeanor. "Along with evidence from 37 other survivors," Rachel announced, right on cue. She entered with 2 junior officers, all carrying boxes of files. All bearing the same signature methods, the same financial patterns, the same psychological warfare. Mr. Parker's creativity, it seems, was limited to his choice of victims, not his methodology. William leaned forward, whispering urgently to Harrison, but Emma wasn't finished. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, knowing it might be her only chance to speak truth to power. "My father found the truth 10 years ago," she continued, holding up the recovered hard drive from the crash site. "His last act was trying to warn me about the monster hiding behind a perfect smile. William made sure he never got the chance." The courtroom stirred as documentation appeared on mounted screens. William's entire operation laid bare. Bank records, death certificates, insurance claims, all forming a deadly pattern spanning 15 years. "Your Honor," Diana Chen stood, her voice steady. "Given this overwhelming evidence and the defendant's clear flight risk, as demonstrated by recent attempts to access offshore accounts, the state moves to deny bail." William's composure finally shattered completely. He lunged forward, all pretense of civility gone. "You stupid bitch. You really think you've won? I still own half this city. Every judge, every cop." Guards rushed to restrain him, but his threats echoed through the courthouse. "You're nothing without me. Nothing." Emma stood, eyes locked with her would-be destroyer. "No, William, I'm everything you tried to destroy but couldn't. Every woman here is, and that's why you'll never understand how we beat you. Because you never learned the one thing that matters most." "And what's that?" he spat. "Real strength isn't in what you can take from others, it's in what you can survive and still keep your soul." The judge's gavel fell like a death knell on William's empire. Bail denied. Defendant is remanded to custody pending trial. As William was led away, still shouting threats and promises of revenge, Emma felt Tommy's small hand slip into hers. Sarah's arm wrapped around her shoulders. Rachel stood guard nearby, ever watchful. The battle was won, but Emma knew better than to celebrate yet. William still had resources, hidden allies, ways to strike back. His network of corruption and influence wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time since her parents died, she felt truly strong. Not because she was fearless, fear would always be there, a wise companion warning of real dangers. She was strong because she had found something William could never understand. A family forged in fire, bound not by blood but by survival, justice, and love. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As they left the courthouse by a side entrance to avoid the press, Tommy looked up at her. "Is it over?" Emma squeezed his hand, sharing a knowing look with Sarah and Rachel. "No, sweetie. But today we proved something important." "What's that?" "That the truth, no matter how long buried, finds its way to the light. And that light is the best disinfectant for men like William Parker." The marble floors of the Richardson Industries Tower echoed with Emma's determined footsteps as she walked into the boardroom, her head held high. William stood at the window, his once impeccable suit now wrinkled, his composure cracking at the edges. "It's over, William," Emma said firmly, placing a thick folder on the mahogany table. "Every transaction, every victim, every crime, it's all here." William turned, a shadow of his former arrogance flickering across his face. "You don't understand, Emma. I did it all for us. For us? Emma's laugh was bitter. You murdered my parents. You poisoned me slowly. You tried to steal everything I built. Outside the boardroom, Sarah and Tommy waited with Rachel Martinez and a team of FBI agents. Sarah held Tommy close, both of them tense as they watched through the glass walls. Your father was weak, William spat, his facade finally cracking. He was going to ruin everything. I had to take control. And you were just like him. Too soft, too trusting. My father was a good man, Emma's voice shook with emotion. And I was never weak, William. I was kind. There's a difference. William lunged forward suddenly, reaching for a concealed weapon. Sarah burst through the door, pushing Tommy behind her. Don't you dare, she shouted. The FBI agents swarmed in, but William had already raised his gun. Time seemed to slow as he aimed at Emma, his hand trembling. You want the truth? He screamed, tears streaming down his face. I orchestrated everything. The car accident that killed your parents, I tampered with the brakes. The mysterious illness, I've been poisoning you for months. Every friend who abandoned you, I threatened them all. Emma stood unwavering, her eyes locked on his. I know, William. I've known for weeks, and now everyone knows. He noticed the small red light on the conference phone. The confession had been broadcast live to the emergency board meeting happening downstairs. You're just like the others, he sobbed, his composure completely shattered. Sarah the judge, Patricia the CEO, all of them. Strong women who needed to be controlled. I made them all disappear. But you failed with me, Emma said softly, because I found something you could never understand. Real family. She glanced at Sarah and Tommy, who had become more than just allies in her fight for justice. They had become her strength, her true family. William's hand wavered, the gun lowering slightly. I loved you, Emma, in my way. Your love was a poison, Emma replied, and I finally found the antidote. The FBI agents moved in, disarming William as he collapsed into a chair, broken. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back one last time. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he whispered. I just wanted control. Emma watched as her former husband was escorted out, years of manipulation and crimes finally catching up to him. Sarah approached, putting an arm around her shoulders. It's really over, Sarah said quietly. He can't hurt anyone else now. Tommy ran to Emma, wrapping his arms around her waist. Are we safe now? He asked, looking up at her with those trustful eyes that had first spotted William's suspicious behavior months ago. Emma hugged him tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. Yes, sweetheart. We're safe, and we're together. Rachel Martinez approached with a grim smile. That confession, combined with all our evidence, he'll never see the outside of a prison again. Neither will his accomplices. As the sun set over the city skyline, Emma stood with her new family, watching as William was driven away in a federal vehicle. His tearful confession had come too late to save him, but it had arrived just in time to set Emma and all his other victims free. Let's go home, she said softly, taking Tommy's hand in her right and Sarah's in her left. They walked together toward the elevator, leaving behind the shadows of the past and stepping into the light of their future. The truth had finally come out, paid for with years of pain and sacrifice. But as Emma looked at the faces of her true family, she knew that every tear, every struggle had been worth it. William's confession was too late for redemption, but it was right on time for justice. 1 year after William's dramatic confession, the Richardson Industries tower gleamed in the morning sun, its windows reflecting the promise of a new day. Emma stood in her office, now transformed from William's cold domain into a warm space filled with family photos and children's drawings. Her gaze lingered on the newest addition, a framed adoption certificate for Tommy Richardson. Mom, Tommy's voice rang out as he burst through the door, his school backpack bouncing. At 12, he had grown taller, his once haunted eyes now bright with joy and security. Sarah's here too. Sarah followed him in, looking every bit the respected judge she had once been, and was again. Her reinstatement to the bench 6 months ago had been a moment of triumph for all of them. Ready for the big day? Sarah asked, straightening her judicial robes. Emma smiled, touching the ribbon for the ceremonial scissors. The Richardson Women's Support Center. I still can't believe we're finally opening it. The center occupied the entire 5th floor of the tower, a safe haven for women rebuilding their lives after domestic abuse and financial exploitation. It had been Emma's dream ever since her own recovery, turning her nightmare into hope for others. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered for the opening ceremony. Emma recognized faces in the audience, survivors from William's other schemes, now standing tall and proud. Rachel Martinez, the FBI agent who had become a dear friend, sat in the front row. As Emma approached the podium, she saw some former friends who had abandoned her during William's takeover. They stood at the back, faces drawn with shame and regret. She had invited them anyway. Forgiveness, she had learned, was as much about healing herself as others. 1 year ago, Emma began, her voice clear and strong. I thought I had lost everything. My company, my reputation, my trust in others, all stripped away by someone I thought loved me. The crowd hushed, hanging on her every word. But standing here today, I understand that my greatest wealth was never in my bank accounts or my business empire. It was in the courage to trust again, the strength to forgive, and most importantly, the love of the true family I found along the way. She gestured to Tommy and Sarah, who beamed from their seats. A street-smart boy who saw the truth when adults wouldn't listen. A brave woman who lost everything but never lost her dignity. They taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when the world turns its back. The new center was more than just a building. Each room had been carefully designed with input from survivors, legal aid, financial counseling, psychological support, and most importantly, a community of understanding hearts. Today, we're not just opening a center, Emma continued. We're opening our hearts. Every woman who walks through these doors will find what I found: hope, strength, and the knowledge that she is not alone. After the ribbon cutting, Emma led tours through the facility. The walls were adorned with inspiring quotes and artwork created by survivors. In the main hall, a memorial plaque honored those who hadn't survived their abusers, a reminder of why their work mattered. Later that evening, Emma hosted a smaller celebration at home. Their home, the modest but warm house they'd chosen together, far from the cold mansion of her past. Tommy proudly showed Sarah his latest school project, while Emma prepared dinner, the kitchen filled with the kind of comfortable chatter she'd missed during her years of isolated luxury. You know, Sarah said, helping to set the table, when I was living on the streets, I never thought I'd have this again. A purpose. A family. Neither did I, Emma replied, watching Tommy arrange the plates with careful precision. But sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. The doorbell rang, and Rachel arrived with a bottle of wine and news that William's appeals had been denied. His network of corruption had been completely dismantled, his co-conspirators brought to justice. As they sat down to dinner, Emma looked around the table at these faces she had come to love. Tommy, enjoying the security of a real home. Sarah, restored to her rightful place in society. Rachel, who had become like a sister. This was wealth that no one could steal. The following morning, Emma arrived early at the center to find 3 women waiting at the door, their eyes showing that same mix of fear and hope she had once felt. She welcomed them in, ready to share not just resources, but understanding. A reporter had once asked if she regretted losing her perfect life with William. Emma had laughed. Perfect? No. What I have now, this messy, beautiful, real family, this is perfect. In her office, she kept a small photo from the days when she was trapped in William's web. Not to remember the pain, but to remind herself of how far she had come. Next to it stood a new photo. Emma, Tommy, and Sarah at the adoption ceremony, their faces glowing with joy. Tommy's school essay hung framed nearby. The title read, My Hero, My Mom. In his childish handwriting he had written, a hero isn't someone who never falls. It's someone who gets back up and helps others stand too. As the sun set over their city, Emma gathered her family for their nightly tradition of sharing the day's victories, no matter how small. This, she thought, was her true empire, built not on money or power, but on love, trust, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever found strength in unexpected places? Tell us your story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Together we can spread hope and understanding, one story at a time. Sometimes the greatest riches are found in the moments when we have nothing left but hope and the courage to begin again.